There is a revolution going on right now in the karate world. More and more karate nerds, such as yourself, are getting increasingly interested in how to apply their techniques in a functional setting. It's not just enough to kick and punch in thin air or to use karate as a sport to score points. They want to know the true functionality hidden beneath the surface of the moves to make karate practical, like it was supposed to be. And the reason this revolution is happening right now is because of two things. Number one is the internet, which changed everything. In the old day, you could practice your karate in your corner of the world and not have any clue about what other people did. But right now, that's impossible because everything is transparent online. You can see what people are doing and compare that to what you're doing. And if you don't like what you're doing, well, you're gonna do something else. The second factor is MMA, mixed martial arts. And I know because my brother is a professional fighter. And whenever we practice, I discover at least 20 new practical applications of the karate moves I've been doing since I was a kid. Because I never had that pressure testing that is so prevalent in modern combat sports like MMA. And it is the world's fastest growing martial art. It's everywhere. Even your grandma probably knows a double leg takedown and some ground and pound. And the revolution is a fact. So the question is, should we now practice for exposure, or should we use the internet and MMA to expose our practice and to see if we can dig deeper and find what really works? Well, I contacted somebody who really knows, somebody who saw this coming before everybody else and did it before we could even see it. That person is Sensei Patrick McCarthy, and today he's gonna reveal a pathway so that you can learn how to make your karate functional again. Check it out.
Like, would you want me to focus on a particular area or, kata? You want to talk about kata? Or...
There's this huge wave of people who want to make their karate more practical. As you know, it's more popular than ever, but there's a lot of misinformation or just ignorance out there. So I thought, why not go to a pioneer such as yourself to get to the bottom of this so that people can actually learn this concept that is...
Oh, we're recording that. I was just wondering why you're like impeccable right now. And I thought, so good. I realized the recording light's on.
Well, I haven't...
Okay, hang on, sorry.
Let me do an introduction, all right?
Okay, sir.
What's up, karate nerds? Today I'm joined by the one and only Sensei Patrick McCarthy. Thank you so much for being here, Sensei.
Son, it's always a pleasure to be here, and great to see you. And please wish your mom happy Mother's Day today. Don't forget now. I hope you're giving her some flowers.
Now, most people know you as the Western world's #1 karate historian, researcher, and author, and your most famous piece of work, I assume, is the Bubishi, the Bible of karate. But what I would like to discuss today is something known as the habitual acts of physical violence, a concept that you've discovered and popularized throughout your work, but a lot of people don't know about this. However, I think it is the most important concept in all of karate if you want to make your art functional. Why are we always defending against karate attacks and not street fighting attacks?
You think of a bicycle wheel for a minute.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spokes, right?
Yeah.
And so if you could think of the wheel as a budo, the martial ways of Japan, and then all the different spokes in it could be representative of the different fighting arts. Kendo, judo, aikido, shorinji, kempo, things like that, sumo. So we'll think that Karate-do became one of those in December of 1933. And it was based largely upon very embryonic practices that were brought up from Okinawa. So the idea of grappling with somebody was not needed by the Japanese from the Okinawans at that time, because the judo and jujitsu, the modern interpretation of jujitsu by Kanajiguro was much more prevalent on the mainland Japan, as was kendo. So they didn't need weapons and they didn't need the grappling. But this idea of the clenched fist, and this was a good idea. And they'd never seen kata. I mean, if you think in terms of the value of karate kata, especially during that time, I mean, you know, with kendo, you need two people to make it work. Now with judo, you need two people to make it work. But, you know, with karate, you could do it by yourself. It kind of all makes sense. Kata wasn't used for its application purposes in the way that you and I are going to talk about today.
Yeah.
It was used as an adjunct through which to funnel physical fitness and social conformity. So it's not surprising that it would catch on. It was a couple of students of Funakoshi Gichin who with already an extensive background in jujitsu and kendo, who decided that they needed to create something that was more indicative of what had already existed that would help with the current mindset in the manner of learning. So they developed something called Kihon. And that was, so Kihon's not hundreds of years old, it was really just developed in the 20s and 30s. And that was, those two specific people I'm talking about was Otsuka Hironori and Konishi Yasuhiro. Interestingly enough, these two guys who came from different backgrounds were just born 1 year apart from each other and died, interestingly, 90 years later, 1 year apart from each other. And when somebody say, you know, in kendo, I go like this, I go to, you know, hasso or jodan, and I come with the attack, you know, and it's a beautiful template back and forth, you know, and hopefully that template leads to functionality. And the same thing in judo, you know, I learned gi, and I learned about ukemewaza, and I learned about the footwork, and I practice a million uchikomis to, you know, enter into the situation, and then bang, randori is you know, but where is that in karate? There wasn't, you know, there wasn't any when it came up to the mainland of Japan. So guys like Konishi and Otsuka, they are seen as the pioneers of this movement, from which Kihon led to, well, let's get, how do you apply the Kihon? Well, if I attacked you with a reverse punch, you could do, you know, you could do the age uke. And so let's make a one-step attack. Now let's make a two-step attack, and then a sanbon kumite, a three-step attack. And ultimately, the breadcrumbs led to jiukumite, freestyle sparring. So why can't you just question it and say, that's not wrong, let's do something else? Here's why. Modern Japanese culture is built upon a millennium of extremely discriminatory, male-dominated culture of conformity that rests quite nicely into a Confucian-based mindset. And the first tenet of Confucianism is filial piety, or ancestor worship. What we take from that is the no questioning of authority. So what is the mechanism that keeps it all together? Thanks for asking. It's the senpai kohai system. And of course, in a perfect world, what that means is mentorship. The juniors imitate the ways of the seniors, and the imitative behavior through the trickle-down effect perpetuates the practice or the mindset or so on. Well, think about this. If there's no questioning of authority, so here's a tradition that's been handed down, taught a certain way. There, in this structured mechanism, exists the reason why the reverse punch or front kick or whatever it happens to be has never been questioned. And then you get, you know, I learned very early on in Japan, you've lived in Japan, you know what I'm talking about. Please help other people understand it, is don't rock the boat. You know, if this is the way it's being taught, that's the way it's being taught. And who are you? You're just a gaijin. You don't know anything about our culture, our language, you know, because everything fits into a box in Japanese culture because it's been done for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Except for, and I think many of your subscribers or members, oh, sorry, nerds, I'm the old nerd. They'll laugh, the ones who've lived in Japan, because they'll know what I mean when I say, you gaijin, we Japanese. You know, there was always a distinction made, and I'd make sure that, you know, that you are, you know, you're not the same as us type of thing. Yeah. Good or bad, it's irrelevant. It's just, that's the mindset. So understanding that makes it a little easier to understand why.
Yeah.
So we get back to the point. Here, I made the big circle, get back to the point. If you're looking at self-defense, you better hope that if you ever do need to defend yourself, that you have experienced that which is probably going to happen. And the number one thing that's going to happen is a lot of hell is going to break loose. And the brutality that is associated with this behavior is very unpredictable. And so, and it wasn't like, oh, hey, Pat, what are you doing? Oh, hey, Bob, I'm just warming up a little bit because I'm getting in a fight at 4 o'clock down on the corner. I'm just warming up, you know. That's not the way it works. You know, I in my teaching, I draw on a dear old Irish friend of mine, Sensei Murphy. What can go wrong will go wrong. And the more aggressive resistance there is, the more it's likely to happen. In the learning process, for all the parents out there, by the time your son or daughter got to a certain age where, you know, you wanted to, I want a bicycle, you know, they wanted to get on a bike or something. So what did you do? It's not the 50s anymore. You know, okay, Bob, put him on thing and just shoot him down the hill and come back, be home before dark. That used to happen, by the way. The reason why you don't teach your children that way is because they could be harmed or they could be hurt. And the reason why you don't want to harm or hurt them is because they're your children and you love them. So let me just switch that scenario around. If you're a sensei, you should be more concerned with the direction of your students than you are with yourself. You don't want to harm your student. You want to teach them how to learn, not necessarily what to learn. You want to give them the seeds from which to grow and understand what you and I already know to be true. And so you say to the child on the bicycle, we're going to put your elbow pads on, your little helmet, maybe even a mouthpiece, I don't know, you know, when you take the training wheels off, you know, and we're going to put you on training wheels first, and we're going to go around. And there's this little pathway process that you follow before your child can take the training wheels off and drive around the house with no hands. And it's that process that I'm talking about. So the person who's going to attack you, they're going to use passive resistance. They're going to comply. They're going to be compliant with you. And that doesn't mean that you're going to take their head off. You know, I see that all the time at seminars. I teach somebody, I say, please take it easy to, you know, already somebody going to, it doesn't work. You know, their heads, you know. So the idea is to, the mechanism in the pathway process is to use passive resistance. Passive resistance, adding resistance, adding resistance, adding, and not just on this side, not just the attacker, but also the defender. Because here's something, again, people don't talk very much about. If the attacker is bent upon, as I reached out, grabbing you and pounding you. Okay, but let's say he reached out, grabbed you, and as he did that, I was able to protect myself, maybe overhook the arm or something like that, slam an elbow in before he hit me. That doesn't mean he's going to stop pounding me. So now we have this process that's played out. And through the process, through the pathway process that I call it, the aggressive resistance reveals my friend, Sensei Murphy. And Sensei Murphy, as I mentioned earlier, is the guy who what can go wrong will go wrong. And that really, my friend, becomes the learning process itself, because it's adversity that gives you the best lesson. So that process becomes the art itself. You know, you go to the karate dojo, you learn, you know, kihon, and then after the kihon, you start to assemble the kihon into drills, and ultimately you've got a kata, you know, and I call that this kind of pyramid structure of learning, you know, and my own opinion is that it's detrimental to progress, to tell you the truth, unless you're in a rule-bound cultural recreation, where you never have to test the veracity of what you're doing because everybody's complying with you. That's wonderful, you know. So, but that's not the perspective that I'm taking. So the two-person associated drill, it becomes the art itself, and they can rehearse that movement. He's grabbed me. I push my hand on his face. I elbow him as he. I wrap my arm around his neck. I got a semi-guillotine. I start to use my other hand to push my, this is the radial bone, across the carotid artery from here. Oh, but he escaped from, how did he do that? Well, he was able to plant his feet solid on the ground, get his hands on my hip, and shove. So they created a big distance like this between my body, and he used that to escape. Back to the drawing board again. I got it now. This time, in the bear hug, when he grabs me, and I start shoving his face, and he knocks my hand out to the side, and I put the elbow in, and I guillotine him in the space that I've created in that heartbeat of moment of time as he's still trying to crush me. I get my hand around, I start cranking up like this, and knowing that he might try to use his feet to stabilize his balance, I take my right foot, I grapevine his left leg, I adduct my legs together tightly so he can't separate his legs to get that balance. And he's getting strangled. Little stars are starting to come in there like that as I'm putting a squeeze on him. And then as he's trying to get the balance to go, he goes to sleep. And the funny part about that is there's your first move in Basai Dai, for example, you see. And so I'm able to reenact that template as a mnemonic mechanism, and it serves to remind me what to do in that set of circumstances, you see. And then you can take the solo representation and glue them together in any geometrical configuration that you choose as an artist, science and art coming together. This is the magic of what a dojo should represent, in my opinion. And you are able to create something greater than the sum total of its individual parts. And therein is the process by which kata evolved. And so the end result is to arrive at functionality for you. And by the way, the learning is separate. That's a whole separate thing. By the way, it's like teaching and doing. It's two different sets of outcomes. So you've learned, you've practiced, and now let's jump ahead. Now you're ready to train.
We had a look at the solo representation. Let's look at the act of violence. It's a simple double lapel grab. And for that, I could be headbutt, I could be kneed, I could be thrown to the ground, I could be choked. So the moment it happens, you need to create a distraction. Just a really quick, and a flick to the testicles with the fingertips is perfect. I told you earlier, your hands can only ever be in 3 positions unless you're seizing. On top, underneath, or 1 over, 1 under, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. In this case, I want the left hand to come over his right hand. That's his power hand. I want the other hand to come up underneath him from here. And watch what happens as I hold him in this position. I compromise the integrity of his balance by stepping backwards from here. As I step backwards from here, I try to push the hand out. I may get it, I can't say, oh, you've attacked me wrong. I push it out. If he doesn't break up, that's okay. I just need a pathway to get my hand through. I'm holding his strong hand down there. So all I do is I reach out and grab it, I stick my thumb in his eye. And when he comes back to grab a hold of that, I turn the head sideways like this. And then as I pull his head around, I bicep bump. I bicep bump the face. At the jaw, I want to get that brain stem twist, affecting the sympathetic nervous system and effectively putting this guy out of business for the time being. But that's one thing. Let's look at the solo reenactment of that if we can in a template form. I'm standing here like this. I put one hand over, I went like this, I turn the hand out. I stepped in with the first hand to the eye socket, I then turned the neck, and then I bicep bump. I put some form to that and it becomes this. So what I mean to say then about the kata is they're a collection of conceptual practices against habitual acts of physical violence, which when linked together, not only culminate the lessons you should have already learned in a 2-person practice, they create something greater than the sum total of their individual parts. And therein lies the essence of kata. Are we good? Let's get back to work.